Great. Well, I'm going to pull us back a little bit more towards kind of the topic of the metrics that matter and don't matter. And I'm going to go to Zahir's question. I thought Zahir had a great question, but it's really topical, I think, for what we're seeing. So with pay transparency becoming more and more prevalent with job postings, including ranges for 40% of jobs now, what metrics are we using to ensure that we're remaining competitive? And I think that this can go beyond just kind of a market percentile rate. I think if I start to consider that, if the goal is to attract, retain, and engage, I think there are some other metrics that are beyond kind of, the market percentile we target. One of those I kind of think of is, average time to fill or time to fill roles. Are there others that, do you guys agree with that as an important metric, or, to, Paul
Big
saying
no
no?
from me, Justin. You wanted some examples of things that don't matter. Time to fill is one I'm going to veto on you here, and it's largely because I've seen the baggage that comes from thinking of that as like your attractiveness measure. You might just be choosy, or you might just have people that want to take their time and be more inclusive in how they interview. So time to fill I have found is one that's not real clean to use as a comp measure, unfortunately. I think we over prioritize that, and our talent acquisition partners, because they're measured on it, love to sort of bring it up, but it's usually not driven by pay. I did run an experiment a couple of years ago where we looked at like where jobs were shorter and longer time to fill. Was there a correlation between position and range or comp relative to benchmark? And the answer is no. There was zero difference. Like being more aggressive with pay didn't make jobs hire faster. So I'm not big on that one. I'm just not big on time to fill. But on the hiring side, like ability to hire is, of course, like a business issue. So, I would prefer, organizations that measure offer acceptance rates, makes a big deal. In an era where you're putting ranges in postings, I am actively tracking sort of applicants per job to see if we're seeing differences in applicant flow now that we're posting ranges. So there are other things on the hiring side, but I wouldn't go down the time to fill path. It's a difficult one.
That's a fantastic point, Paul.
Yeah, I like that metric you pointed out, Paul, about around the number of applicants who are applying to your roles. There's a lot of research out there that says most folks, especially Gen Z, they're just not even going to consider applying to your organization if you don't have a job posting in there. It was about 70% from a recent study I read. And so, it'd be interesting to see what that applicant volume looks like before you post those ranges, and does that change afterwards? And then even having anecdotal conversations with recruiters around, are you getting a lot of pushback or noise around the competitiveness of our ranges? And are you getting declines? And to the extent, and that's all based on the extent to which candidates are willing to truly share with you why they're declining a role. A lot of people say it's comp, but oftentimes there's other factors that drive why people decline a role. Maybe it's, more interesting work at another organization, or maybe they clicked with another team or manager better. The comp is not typically like that one make or break reason for declines.
It's also an okay reason to lose candidates. Like if even if you've got a good candidate, if they're demanding too much, and you had a lot of this a few years ago when pay was getting a bit silly in some places because there's so much competition, and it created so many more problems. Like you had like the manager said, if we don't pay this, we're not going to hire. So, and I do empathize with that, but also it created a lot of problems at the same time because you're going outside your stated philosophy to hire people, which created internal equity problems, and then they had to bring other people on to catch up. So, again, coming back to time to fill, it's just not reasonable because there could be very valid reasons as to why it's taken that time.
I would say that it's a little bit scary to think of time to fill as a compensation metric. And I think there are others, even attrition rate. Sometimes people in the business want to point at attrition rate as a compensation metric when, it may be one of 30 variables that are included in what really makes up an attrition rate. And so I think we have to be really careful at some of these metrics that are so commonly used and really understand what's going into that number. It's oftentimes a lot of things.